Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. He said that fool, you weren't cool. He took a book to your school. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Don't get shocked if you get mocked. It's what you find when you use your mind. Don't you sweat it, look 'em in the eye. Don't regret it, hold your head high. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Try to show some tenderness, even when they're playing chess. You think it's dumb to be smart, but that's the way you make art. So be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Use your brain, that's a start. It's a
Hi, I'm James Eade at Eade Foundation, and this is Change Your Mind. And, I live in the divided states of America. How do we become united again? And unity is not uniformity. We don't have to talk alike, act alike, dress alike, think alike. But we're too caught up in changing other people's minds so that they will have uniformity of thought. But we don't practice changing our own mind very well. It's about mindfully listening to others. So I have a show where I take a position on something and I have a guest come on and try to change my mind. And, during the pandemic, I was one of the many, many people that relied on Amazon delivery I just would have to log on to my computer, order something, and it would be delivered to my door. I didn't have to go out because it was dangerous to go out, it seemed. And, so is it changing now? How did that happen? How did Amazon step up to meet our needs? And I've been hearing a lot about drones taking over in the delivery system, and I'm a skeptic. I can't see that happening. So I brought on somebody who's got a background in this. He's got his PhD from Purdue, and he's going to talk about, because he was one of the guys who started this logistics at Amazon so that they could step up to our needs during the pandemic. Ed McGavin, how are you today?
Hi, Jim. Doing great. Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and trying to change my mind about this. Tell me a little bit about how Amazon did step up.
Okay. Well, when the pandemic first broke out, that was actually pretty stressful and interesting time for us. Amazon had actually scaled up a fairly big logistics operation from virtually nothing in it's like 2014 to again 2020. Actually, we had had a pretty large logistics operation operating within the United States. So when the pandemic broke out, all of a sudden that really got stressed pretty significantly in terms of our ability to meet because there's a huge jump in demand. And so then, our logistics practice and the number of drivers and the number of delivery stations and our headcount, didn't have a chance necessarily to respond, like immediately matching that jump. And so what happened on the Amazon side was on the front end, they went through a process of prioritizing particular products like medicine, toilet paper, food, dog food, that kind of thing, over other things. So if you're ordering Hello Kitty stickers and that kind of stuff, it kind of got pushed to the back of the queue, so to speak. So that was one thing that took place kind of on the front end. But then on the forward end, in terms of our logistics practice, we really did go through a lot of efforts to kind of, again, let's, what can we do to get more things on a vehicle, right? More packages on a van. How can we essentially, it was kind of tough. As you described it, it was kind of, Amazon goes through a process every year called peak, which is between like November 15th and December 25th. It's just nuts. And so our demand goes up like 2.5x during that time. But it's very specified 5.5 to 6 weeks. We know when it starts, we know when it ends. With COVID, and honestly, much like the fires that took place in California the year before and other natural disasters that, when things like that happen, we didn't have any warning it was going to happen. And then when it happened, we had no idea it was going to end. Right.
And you have to ramp up, and then you don't know when you're going to ramp down.
Right. And so that was kind of the thing, is how do we, get the most out of what we have right now, and as well as how do we add to that capacity? The further complication that took place during that time is that our operations were not designed to deal with no contact, right? And so if you think about it, our drivers and our associates and our managers are used to being in close contact with each other. All of a sudden, we're all supposed to maintain 6 feet. Our sorting operations were not designed to have people 6 feet apart from an efficiency perspective.
I never thought
and the same thing with, loading vehicles and the rest of that. So, I mean, it was a pretty challenging time.
Sure.
And honestly, for me, it was very motivating. It was very, I found it very, it was, I really enjoyed that, not from not from a problem perspective, but from a mission perspective. That was, Amazon often gets accused of, being kind of, selfish and a bunch of, focusing on the bottom, line and treating people terribly and that kind of stuff. And I understand where that comes from, but I would argue that this one, during this period, Amazon, we were called essential workers for a reason. And it really was. And it was amazing how, as I would say, kind of the attitude within the leadership team, within, my team, within my associates, as well as, the drivers themselves, it felt really important. They really felt they were doing something important.
And they were.
The feedback that we got from the public was, consistent with that as well. There were a lot of people, a lot of really grateful people who leave snacks for the drivers and stuff. And it really changed people's perspective of, things that we take for granted.
Absolutely. On my walks, if an Amazon driver would go by, I would wave to him and they would wave back. And it was like, just because I was so grateful for the service that they provided. But I'm going
to laugh at you. UPS has always had that kind of relationship and reputation with their customers, and Amazon really, it was a chance for us to kind of, be viewed in that same light. So
right, but your role was one of logistics, and your background, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, optimization, kind of making things work in an optimal way.
It's operations management, so logistics, fulfillment operations, inventory control, that kind of stuff.
So this is your bailiwick. That the problem that you were faced with in 2020 around there was something that you were an expert at. So they relied on your expertise. And how did you personally respond? How did you get this? Because
going from working, the 70 hours a week to 100 hours a week, but past that,
I believe that.
I think this is less an issue of, there was an intellectual part of it, right? But there was also a relationship part of it.
Right.
And I think the relationship part in this situation was almost more important. Wow. And it's, again, all of a sudden I've got a team that has to operate under very different and much more stressful conditions.
Right.
I'm dealing with the situation where not only does the public dealing with COVID, but my teams and drivers and everything else are dealing with COVID, and it's stressful for them. So things like, what do we do on the fly? We have to figure out what to do with, oh my God, I have a driver that's out on the road and all of a sudden they feel terrible, right? They think they have COVID. What do we do with all the packages in the vehicle that if they touched at this time, we didn't know what the transmission vectors were for COVID and the rest of that.
My goodness.
So and on the fly, you'd have to kind of make up these, okay, what do we do? Where you have to worry about, okay, how do I keep my driver safe and how do I keep my team safe and the rest of that? And I think one of the things that actually I liked about Amazon was the fact that it's one of the things, again, I'll talk about Amazon always getting criticized about certain things that they do about but when it comes down to safety, and if there are some, things that you do and say, I chose to do something different from a safety perspective, you don't have to, you're not going to have to discuss that, right? You might a little bit, but on the other hand, it's not that, you will get, called out, hey, I decided to do this. I thought this was a smarter idea because it would save 2 cents a package and the rest of that kind of stuff. You get a certain amount of, did you talk about it and all the rest? In this case, it was very much that I had to make a decision on the fly about the safety of my drivers and the safety of the public, the safety of my team. And this is a decision I made. And if it made sense, it's like, that made fine. And did we learn anything from it? So again, it was all about, we really did stress safety. And that was one of the things I was really happy to see, that I didn't have to justify safety decisions that I made during that time.
No, that must have been very gratifying. So now you've responded, you've geared up, you've got all this stuff going on, and COVID is declared, the emergency is declared over. So do you still have the same type of volume, or is it
No, I would say there was it was kind of as I describe it as we went through, and you probably wrote about it in the news that Amazon like overdid it, kind of overcorrected in terms of we thought maybe this would be something that's going to be a permanent change in, step level increase in demand. And Dave Clark, who was our operations leader at the time, really invested in taking advantage of that to build out some of our logistics capabilities or fulfillment capabilities, additional, fulfillment centers and that kind of thing. And to be blunt, in 2021 and 2022, we did have to, put on hold a number of expansion plans and actually shutter some operations because the demand wasn't there to justify what we'd done. So
that must have been
we
tough?
we did overextend. Yeah, that was hard. So to come back from that and tell drivers and and workers and things like that thanks for growing with us, and now we don't have that was kind of hard. And I think also that extends all the way through this, I guess I'll call it the value chain, is, you gear up a landlord to say, hey, we're going to rent your building, or gear up, a provider who's, selling vehicles. Hey, we're going to buy all these vehicles. And then all of a sudden, like, never mind. That's not a good place to be. And it was actually fairly uncomfortable and very difficult. We're used to doing it after peak. And we developed kind of a thick skin about doing that with our workforce. This actually was bigger than that. It actually extended to our supplier chain and and our fixed assets and the whole thing. So
right,
that was pretty tough after that.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I'd say the market wasn't very kind to us either. All of a sudden, it was like, look at all the money you spent, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So
You fools.
there was a little bit. You have a new CEO who's being held to different standards than Jeff Bezos was, and
yeah. And hindsight is 2020, and we always know the right decision when we look backwards at what happened. But yeah, this is one of those logistical problems that has no real solution, because you can't predict the future. You don't know, like you do know, from November to December 25th, we're going to have an increase.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
Right.
That's
right. But something like this, nobody knew.
Well, it's easy logically. It's not much, but it's not easy physically, because
and also emotionally, like you were saying, like all the changes that they had to go through when the pandemic was first starting, and you kind of had these relationships that you were building, to, and to have people, they had to make changes in the routines that they had, even if it's just trivial, like standing 6 feet apart. But there's more to it than that, and I'm sure you're aware of it more than I am. But you build those relationships, and then couple of years later, you're having to say, I'm sorry, but I no longer need your services. That's got to be heartbreaking.
That was hard. Yeah. And like I said, we're used to doing it on a seasonal basis.
Right.
And we actually have mechanisms built in for that. And again, they're not, there's things to be said, can be fairly cruel at sometimes, but this was hard, because it was, we asked people to step up, and we asked people to partner with us and go along on this journey with us. And then it's, and I would say, to Amazon's defense, we'd have been happy to keep expanding. I mean, we didn't want to do that, right? And Amazon, that was very painful for everybody involved, the leadership team, and so I don't misunderstand that it's Amazon, pulling the plug, but it just wasn't, economically, the demand moved back out to, people started going to the grocery store again. People started going out,
I did. Yeah. The growth was not sustainable. And that was, that's no one is at fault for that.
Yeah. But I will say that, in terms of, if you kind of think back in terms of, is the growth of online, did we kind of get back on the original curve? I think so. I think there were a number of things that we got used to buying online, that, things that have changed in behaviors in terms of consumers that hadn't used it before. And, there was kind of a step level increase in terms of, without the pandemic, right, that wouldn't have happened, or would have happened later. But, that was kind of the demand leveled off and dropped like really quickly. I mean, that was like almost as quickly as it showed up. It
evaporate.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Well, I don't want to generalize from an N of one, but my buying habits have certainly changed, and I do much more online shopping. And I don't think I'm alone. And I think that that what I want to know is okay, this relationship stuff was really tough. The drivers you have to let go, that kind of stuff's real tough. So, that's the human element. What if you got rid of the human element and just used machines to do
Amazon has often been accused of that's the ultimate goal. I think if you read and been paying attention to the news, and Amazon's continuing to invest in robotics, and and there's been some announcement recently about one of the things within our our fulfillment centers is we've had automated. I'll use the term automated storage and retrieval systems for a while, in terms of we have these things called Kiva fields where somebody actually who's picking and packing is, instead of them having to go get the stuff, there's a little robot that brings the material to them, that goes out into the warehouse, what's called the Kiva field of the warehouse, and brings the shelf with the stuff on it back to the person who's picking. So I don't have to have a picker out there doing that anymore. So that's, we've been doing that for a long time. One of the things with regard to actually picking and packing, it turns out that, go fetch is fairly easy compared to apparently this thing of your hand being able to reach and turn, and, all the things that your hand does is actually fairly, not crush something with your fingers and that kind of stuff. Right. Yeah. It's a fairly complicated. Yeah, that's a problem that Amazon's been working on for a long time, and I think they've made a lot of strides on it recently. And so when you ask the question is, are we going to, there's across the board, even within Amazon and other things as well, right? Other places as well. Sure. There is, there's a lot of things that, we used to have, telephone operators, and, and I can go back through a million things that were automated.
Striking over that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, AI is, if you write software, if you're AI is not your friend, right? Unless you're writing AI software. But,
even if you're a writer now, the screenwriters.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually kind of horrifying. I'd never really, but I have paid attention to it recently. Intellectual property of having it, Chat GPT kind of appropriate that, right? Yep. That kind of thing. So yeah, I think across the board, for hundreds of years we've been moving from to automated processes for manufacturing, automated processes for services, automated processes.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
Yes, it is what it is, right?
Yep.
I joke that we got rid of the car, replaced people who used to take care of horses, right?
Yep. Horse and buggies. Yep. Buggy not so much.
Yeah. So.
But I wanted to get back to something, because you said it sparked my imagination, and it was really interesting to me, the complexity of the human hand, because one of the things that in evolutionary terms, tool making and tool using, because of our hands, that was a big step in the evolutionary growth and gains that we're able to achieve as a species. Now,
it has something to do with, what is it? The fact that we're uprights, hairless, have big brains, and and our hands are like this, are all related. That big brain if you didn't have a big brain, you couldn't use the hand, and if you didn't have the hand, it led to the development of the big. It's all that's.
Yeah. So it's a marvel to think that. Well, it's a marvel, like we were talking about AI. A lot of this stuff that we're living in an age of marvels. There's no question about that technology-wise. But the complexity of the moving the hand. So the term of like just picking and folding, maybe, or these types of things. We take them for granted that we can do them, but they're not so easy to replicate from a machine's point of view. But
because you don't realize how many things are going on. When I use my hand for something, you don't realize how many different individual, if you were to actually go back and say, what are all the things that my hand did, and to actually list each one of those actions kind of at the detailed level, it's pretty complicated. Yeah.
It's decision making, one after another after another.
You don't realize it. Yeah. But even like holding something, the pressure you put on it,
right?
And the automated, you don't even think about. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to something. Can a drone pick up a package, fly through the air, and put it on my doorstep?
Sure.
And will that be cost effective for you to do in the future? Will customer satisfaction be maintained?
I don't know.
I'm very skeptical that
You're
can
very
be.
skeptical.
Yes.
I think drone deliveries are. I'm surprised it's taken this long to get where we are. I think back in 2015 or something, Jeff Bezos was on 60 Minutes saying, "Look, we can deliver things by drones, and it's coming." And it feels like we've made no progress in 10 years, right? And I'm not going to lie. If you read you know, the trade magazines, the rest is Amazon has not made great progress with regard to drone deliveries. In fact, Walmart, Google Wing, and other groups have made more progress than Amazon specifically has. UPS is really starting to make some progress there with regard to drone deliveries, et cetera. So I think that the notion of having drones deliver to your house is, I was going to say, it's often hard to predict future, because just as soon as, I think there's a million things where you can say that, hey, this is, and then something completely different, like, manufacturing, 3D printing. Well, I don't need to buy anything anymore, right? So no, there's no reason to deliver anything to my house. Okay. And so barring that kind of, change in, and then that I think is if we continue to buy, things, and especially in a consumer driven society where that stuff becomes cheaper and more available, and, and the rest of that, I think drone delivery is, especially as deliveries become, Amazon's really pushed the envelope on this with regards to smaller, more frequent deliveries. Right. Although it's pretty funny now, we've pivoted back to, hey, save $5 by, have this delivered on your day, right? So,
right.
Which is kind of entertaining. But it's contrary to the fact of what we've kind of pushed about, hey, just if you put it in your shopping basket, just order it. Don't wait till you have because you don't have a delivery charge. If you're a Prime member, you don't have to wait for 5 things to accumulate to make the delivery charge worth it, right? You just point, click, ship. So, but I do think that that drone deliveries, especially for smaller deliveries, that's inevitable, because again, the cost of that is coming down. The ability to again, the economics of logistics, last mile logistics, is all about how much stuff can you put on a truck, okay, and how much can one person deliver, right? And that's really, honestly, if you look at all the other costs in the chain of how I get something from, I've got it in a box, now how do I get it to the customer? I put it on a line haul, I take it, I sort it, I put it in a van, whatever. It's that last mile, when it hits that van, almost, I'm not saying anything, I don't think that's, as I would say, Gartner or whatever else would support me on this. About 70% of the cost takes place once it is incurred in that on the van, in terms of the cost of delivery. Everything else up to that is,
peanuts compared.
Well, I wouldn't say it's peanuts, but it is. It's not. That's where the serious money is. And so the big push is, if you talk to UPS and everybody, last mile, even the post office, is how much can one person deliver? Because that is where the real money is, right? And if I can get them by making their deliveries more efficient, denser, more stuff when I drop it off at one time. That's really the key driver of cost in that process.
See, this is interesting, because that last mile thing is something that I haven't spent sufficient time thinking through, because my imagination was saying, okay, drones could be useful taking from one fulfillment center to another, but not. The problem I'm having with the on my doorstep stuff is you've got Amazon, Walmart, and UPS, and all these other drones buzzing around in their sky. I can't picture it. It doesn't seem like, how do you don't communicate with the other companies? How do you avoid?
Oh yeah, no. I was going to say you're going to need, in terms of moving forward in this. You're going to need air traffic control and the rest of that. A drone air traffic control system, which we have not invested in. Yeah, there is. But we have the same thing. We didn't, I'll go back to, pick anything in terms of an internet, vehicles with highways, the rest of that. I mean, at the same time, we're building out this whole network of, what is it? Autonomous vehicles, right? That don't require a driver. I mean, there's like 5 different groups that are working in the Bay Area with regard to trying to solve that problem.
My wife can't wait.
Well, I think it's interesting that there's certain groups. Driving is not my favorite thing to do. It feels like a giant waste of my time, and so anytime that I can, even if I have to get from one point to another, short of having the Star Trek thing of zipping me there, anything that doesn't require me to pay attention. And honestly, I would argue that I think data has shown that, and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around this, but automated systems are actually safer in the long run than relying on humans and things like that.
I would think
one of the things that makes our air system so safe, all right, is there's a huge amount of, checks and double checks and safety checks and the rest of that built into that. But the amount of automation that's built into flying, the amount of automation, I would say, actually, you don't realize this in terms of flying itself. Your pilot is not, spends a lot of time monitoring things,
absolutely,
and things like that. And technically, even the space shuttle, I remember back when it was flying, I did some work with that team, and the engineering team there was perfectly happy if they didn't need an astronaut to land it, they said, we know how to do this. We do not need an astronaut to do the landing of this at all.
Isn't it amazing?
But I'm just pointing out that, automated systems, I know we don't trust them. And, from a legal perspective, who do we,
right.
who's liable if an automated vehicle goes crazy, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the wild west as far as that's concerned.
Right.
But the thing is like we're having trouble building the infrastructure for electronic vehicles, because getting.
I think it's simpler to do it. I think it's simpler to do it from in the air.
Really?
Yeah, you don't have as many constraints right now. Automated vehicles have like 1 degree of freedom. You have to be on the road, right? And there's already traffic on the road you have to deal with. There's already pedestrians on the road you have to deal with. There's already a number of control mechanisms, stop signs, and all the rest of that stuff that you have to deal with, right?
Well, not so much the automated driving part, just the electronic, replacing gas with electronic vehicles. You have
it's the electric now. Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. So one of the challenges in drone delivery, as I'll call it, the physics problem, is that lift is expensive. ask anybody who's put anything to orbit. Getting something in orbit is really expensive. And and air shipping is really not, is very expensive as well, right? And because lift is, gravity is real.
Yeah. Okay. And you have to achieve escape velocity.
Well, not so much. And I think that one of the things that I've kind of been interested in is kind of the trade-off between is that right now, in terms of, you look, there's 2 kind of technologies with regard to drone delivery. And so kind of the one that Amazon, a lot of other teams have invested in as well, called the old, it's called the helicopter model, which is a vertical takeoff and landing. And so you're thinking, I'm going to land in somebody's yard and the rest of that kind of stuff. Honestly, that's kind of expensive. And it's not very efficient, which explains why, you and I don't have helicopters to fly around in, right? Because that's not that's a very expensive flight. But on the other hand, you and I don't think anything about jumping on an aircraft to go someplace. So if you look at fixed wing kind of air travel, lift is your friend there, right? So, a fixed wing is really, you get free lift off a fixed wing. You don't have to move it like a helicopter to get lift has to move something, right? And so now the downside is that lift, you have to be moving forward and trying to land something in somebody's backyard is the challenge. So if you look at some of the really successful drone delivery models that have taken place so far, have been in remote areas like in Rwanda and stuff like that, where they've been delivering medicine, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's been hugely successful of sending, honestly, radio controlled aircraft into, here, and throwing little things out of with parachutes, right? That kind of thing, where the precision of where it lands is less important, and getting it from A to B. And that's been really effective. And it is actually somewhat for small deliveries is fairly efficient. Now, does that work in an urban environment where I've got a 10-story building, things flying by?
You're set.
Yeah. So I think that from you talk about, air traffic control and smaller deliveries, that and the sheer as I would say that between the two models and the sheer number of items that, or of vehicles that would be in the air and having to compete for space. The upside to that is the fact that they actually have three dimensions that they have, that they can work within, as opposed to a vehicle, which is kind of on a road is kind of a one-dimensional thing. Okay. And then the second thing I think is the fact that right now there's nothing there, right? And so now the downside, as you pointed out, is, from a consumer perspective, is how am I going to feel with all this stuff zipping through my airspace as it is? Any of us who live anywhere vaguely close to an airport deal with a lot of that pretty much every day. Anybody who lives by a freeway, you can hear that stuff all the time, right? And so is this any different from what we've gotten used to with regard to air travel, traffic noise, all the other things of urban living that are, this is, just one more thing. And honestly, that is one of the things that, if you look at kind of the literature on it, that they're working really hard on, is how do you, because honestly, noise is actually, it's also, it's wasted energy in some sense, right? Yeah. Is that energy goes into making noise rather than moving the vehicle. All right. And so that's not always a good thing if it's making, I guess it was noise off the wing or off the propeller and that kind of stuff. It's in some sense it's consistent with it's not as efficient as it could be. So
you know what you're making me feel like, Ed? The grumpy old man who's saying, "Get off my lawn."
No, I'm not trying to do it. But I think that the thing that's
the next generation will get you more used to it and more used to it. Yep.
Yeah, how old is a grumpy old man, which I'm one of them? How annoying is it to see, you used to be able to, walk around and, hey, say hi to people. And right now they're either a headset on, they're effing around with their phones and that kind of thing. And,
yeah.
That really kind of stuff. And so, even like I go back to my Amazon experience where, it used to, I walk through my lunchroom, right, and see all my associates, and go up to talk to them, and they're their headset, their own little world, and they're doing, goofing around with their phones, right, as opposed to talking to each other, as opposed to
water cooler phenomena is just
right. And actually, from a leadership perspective, part of that relationship is we've had to learn how to create relationships kind of through and around those devices, and and it's that's a different world. The world is always changing. I joke that my grandfather was old enough that he was 15 when the first Wright brothers flew their first thing. Yeah. And he was only, 80 years old when, we landed on the moon. That's, think about that from his perspective.
Betting against technology and progress is, not a winning strategy. Right. So, Ed, I think I have to thank you. They're running out of time. For changing my mind about the future of delivery. Like I just got to get over myself and think of this,
But you asked it, but let me throw a couple of things out there for thought. You ask if it's going to take people it's going to change people's jobs. I think that one of the things that a lot of the logistics companies have focused on right now is actual fulfillment directly from the fulfillment center to people. That's going to require, as I say, a lot more drones, a lot more distance on drones. And, and what they're trying to do is cut out that middle mile, and they're trying to cut out that, that kind of the steps along the way. I think that there's a different model that I'm surprised that people aren't kind of leveraging more, which is I'm going to change my delivery van to being a drone hub, and I'm going to drive out and I'm going to stop someplace and I'm going to load up 5 drones and they're going to go deliver. And then I'm going to move down the road and I'm going to stop again. The drones are going to meet me there. I'm going to load them back up again. And I'm, and so I think that's a possibility in terms of, I think is an interesting model in terms of how to use drones. All right.
That's
terms of delivery. And
that
then
makes sense to me. I never thought of it, but now that you point it out to me, it is like so much less offensive.
Okay. And then I think the other thing you're going to find is, like I said, they're going to have to build out this whole air traffic control system, right? Which is going to create opportunities. And then honestly, if you look at the kids, in terms of, I don't mean to bring the military into this, but the military recruited the daylight set of people, all these gamers at one point, because they were the only people that they were used to teach how to fly drones because they're used to dealing with things on screens and the rest of that kind of stuff. And so I think in terms of drone pilots, we're still going to there's going to be some version of that's going to require piloting. And it's going to be, people are going to have, these things where you see that they drone racing and stuff, where they have multiple things in the air and the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
Those kind of skills are going to be not just for screwing around and for fun. They're actually be valuable assets and, kind of in the future. So, but yeah, I think that, like I said, I think drone deliveries are inevitable. I don't think that the model has been figured out yet. There's a bunch of infrastructure that has to be built. But 15 years from now, you're going to wonder, or 20 years. Well, I'm not going to put a number on it, because we all thought we'd have flying cars by now. And we're going to have to deal with that too, because that's the next part of drone delivery is going to be people. So put that, think about that.
Hey, when I watched the Jetsons, I thought it was just around the corner.
All right.
Well, Ed, again, I have to thank you. Lots of things for me to think about.
Have I changed your mind, Jim?
I'm not ready to commit that my mind has changed, but my mind, I feel it changing. So
okay. All right. Well, I'm glad at least I made you think about things from a different perspective.
Absolutely, so. You did, and I appreciate it. And I think if hi, Mom, my audience is very appreciative too. All right, Ed. Thank you. That was Ed McGavin, and he told me that the future of delivery might not be what I think it is, and that there are models that can help us, do things better, more efficiently, more effectively, cost effective, and still provide customer satisfaction, still provide jobs. So I'm trying to digest it and change my mind about this. But the one thing I wanted to say is that, if you have any idea about changing my mind, I want you to think about writing to me at this address, scrolling across the bottom of your screen, info@airu.tv. It's not hard to remember. And if you think you can change my mind about something, and then I'm pretty stubborn, then please write to that, send an email to that address that's scrolling across the bottom of your screen. So once again, thanks so much to Ed McGavin. I thought it was a wonderful thing to change my mind. And remember, every weekend,